6v6 will fix Overwatch, a belief I firmly disagree with. I know, that sounds like a hot take at first, but just hear me out. Overwatch faces many problems, but I don't believe 5v5 is one of them. Of course, there's arguments to be made about the pros and cons of 5v5 versus 6v6, which I will talk about, but there's no easy solution to any of this. Instead of only talking about 5v5 versus 6v6, I want to talk about some of the other issues the game has at the moment and throwing out some ideas about how I think those issues can be potentially fixed. The unfortunate reality is that lots of players just don't have fun with Overwatch anymore, and I think the positive reception to Marvel Rivals says a lot about what Overwatch is doing wrong right now. There's plenty of reasons as to why Overwatch 2 is struggling to keep some players interested. The rampant cheating, the cancellation of PvE, and lots of fewer updates in content each season due to the staff cuts.
Just look at the difference between the Invasion season and Season 14. It's somehow been getting progressively worse. This shit is straight up embarrassing.
Of course, these issues contribute to the lack of interest for lots of people. They're still not the main problem. And just to reiterate, neither is the 5v5 format despite what a lot of people say. 6v6 isn't going to change the fundamental problems the game is having right now. In reality, 6v6 can't change inherently flawed game design. In my opinion, the real issue lies in Blizzard's design and balancing decisions with the characters. Despite community feedback, they keep making changes that just drain the fun from the game. Yes, there have been small improvements, but the game is so unbalanced that fixing it would require drastic character overhauls, which would completely upend the meta. Overwatch has been so unbalanced for so long that at this point, the level of unbalance within the character roster has been completely normalized within the community. Like, people just accept that the roster is completely unbalanced and they will just play whatever they have to just to win. These changes might improve the game, but they'd also upset a lot of players, forcing Blizzard into damage control mode. Both the players and the developers will just have to pick their poison. So then, what exactly needs to change for Overwatch 2 to have a healthy, long-term future? Unfortunately, many abilities and design choices would need a complete rework. To explain what I mean, let's quickly go over the roles in the game and what their purpose within the game is. In Overwatch 2, each team has 5 players split into 3 roles: 1 tank, 2 supports, and 2 DPS, aka damage per second. The tank's job is to protect the team and take down potential threats, and by doing so, creating space for their team to make plays and win the game. Naturally, tanks have higher health pools than most other characters, ranging from
325 for Ramatra
to a massive
625 for Wrecking Ball.
Think of Reinhardt's shield or Zarya's bubble, classic examples of how tanks should be designed to control the game and protect the team. Abilities designed to stop aggression from enemies and control the pace of the game. Think of the tank as the columns that keep the building from collapsing. But here's the problem. Thanks to the way DPS and support characters are built, most tanks can barely do their job anymore. I'd say DPS is arguably the most straightforward role out of all of them. Your objective is pretty plain and simple: do as much damage and get as many kills as humanly possible. Naturally, these characters are designed to do the most damage out of any other role, and their kits are meant for that explicit purpose. Within the dynamics of a team fight, it's up to the DPS to carefully pick the right targets to kill, or prioritize the proper targets that will put the enemy team at a disadvantage if killed. People always say that your priority as a DPS should be to kill supports first, and on paper that is true. Killing the team's healers gives them less room to win fights, since they don't have anyone to heal the damage they take. Granted, team fights don't always go that way, and Overwatch is never truly that simple, but I digress. Supports are teammates who have to be the most flexible out of anyone else on the team. However, a huge percentage of the player base confuses what the real purpose of a support is. A support's job is to heal teammates who are low health to ensure the team's survival, while also doing additional damage and potentially getting the kills that the rest of your team can't. You have to keep an eye on your teammates and be ready to help them out of a bad situation at any moment's notice. If the supports are caught lacking at any time, the team loses. These characters are designed to keep the rest of the team and themselves alive for as long as possible, but at the cost of doing the least damage out of any other role, which is why they're the main targets for DPS characters. The odds of them winning a 1v1 fight against a DPS is supposed to be lower since they're more fragile. That's the trade-off of having abilities that heal and save teammates. That's how it's supposed to work. Keyword supposed to. This role is arguably the most crucial role of them all because the team needs its backbone if they want to stand up straight, right? Overwatch is a game with many layers beneath the surface, which is one of the many reasons why people love this game, including me, and the role system is a big reason for that. Unfortunately, the harsh reality is that these roles don't matter. Okay, of course, that's not necessarily true, but the way a lot of the cast have been designed or redesigned for this game negates the flow of the game that these roles offer and has effectively damaged the team dynamics of the game. As a lot of you might know, at the very core of this issue is the support role, but support isn't the main issue of the game like many players would have you believe. The imbalance is also very much apparent within the tank and DPS roles as well. But first, let's discuss what the main issue with support is. Supports basically do the job of the tank and the DPS at the same time. The potential output of a lot of support characters are pretty similar, if not on par with DPS characters. Baptiste is literally a boss character with multiple phases that can buff his own damage. On top of this, lots of support abilities like Kiriko Suzu, Baptiste Lamp, Life Grip, etc. essentially do the job of the tank without any risk. This allows people to play recklessly knowing they can put themselves in bad positions and not be punished because their supports can get them out for free. In higher level play, this doesn't happen as often because those players are much better at the game, but it doesn't mean the design isn't inherently flawed. These abilities are designed to get teammates out of sticky situations, which is exactly what we talked about earlier, except all the depth has been completely removed from playing this role. If you use these abilities properly, it basically ends up like a get out of jail free card that can be used pretty often, which makes the effort of the DPS feel completely pointless at times. I'm not saying I need these characters to be extremely difficult, but the risk reward dynamic in Overwatch is much lower for support players. I mean, look, we all know the difference between living the good support life and fighting for your life as a tank or DPS. However, supports aren't the only role that are at fault for the game being the way it is. When you really boil it down, tanks are essentially glorified DPS, and that leaves the actual DPS characters in a weird limbo state. Of course, tanks should be able to do plenty of damage. After all, who can you protect if you can't pressure the enemy into playing defensively, right? With the way a lot of the tanks are being played nowadays, you can essentially play them like DPS because they end up doing the same amount of damage as DPS, but they also have more health and have better defensive options. Unfortunately, this leaves DPS in a weird spot where they have to get most of the damage or kills to serve their function, but they're not even the best at doing just that. Within the DPS and tank roles also exists a heavily unbalanced roster of characters that forces a meta of counter picking in order to win. One can argue that being able to swap characters is one of the things that makes Overwatch as interesting as it is, which is true. The problem with the counter swapping meta is that the community will always inevitably play the same team comps because they know what the best ones are. There's hardly a point in maining a specific character if you're always forced to play rock, paper, scissors anyways. If you've ever watched any professional Overwatch competitions, then you'll realize that 9 times out of 10, matches tend to be mirror matches with both teams playing the exact same characters because the lack of balance doesn't support any experimentation. Why have fun playing your favorite characters when you know they lose to the ones who are actually relevant in the current meta? And if your favorite characters happen to be the current meta, then you get to enjoy the mirror match because the enemy team will most likely end up playing those characters too. Now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, I want to talk about how Marvel Rivals might tackle some of these issues. Of course, the game is not perfect and also suffers from a lot of these issues, but still does a better job at combating them than Overwatch is doing right now. Let's take Rocket Raccoon and Adam Warlock as examples of good character design in the support role. Rocket has an ability called the Battle Rebirth Beacon, or the BRB for short. The BRB is a beacon that Rocket deploys that can revive one dead teammate that also periodically produces armor, and it also refreshes his rocket jetpack cooldown. On the surface, it sounds like a broken ability since it has multiple functions that might give your team a significant advantage, but here's where the depth comes in. The BRB can be very easily seen by the enemy team and can be destroyed pretty quickly since it doesn't have a lot of health. The obvious thing to do here is placing it somewhere that isn't within the line of sight for enemies, but putting it too far away can be consequential since it might take your teammates some crucial time to get back into the fight where they might have been needed to win since your team is already down one player. If someone gets revived by the beacon or it gets destroyed, the cooldown is 45 seconds, which may not sound like a lot, but in game, That amount of time can be crucial, and the entire momentum of a game can change in those few moments. You can place it early in the fight if you think there's a chance someone on your team might die first, or you can save it until after someone already dies if your team starts to lose. If you're careless with this ability, it can potentially cost you fights, so you have to judge the situation appropriately and hope that you made the right decision. Adam Warlock's ultimate ability is called Karmic Revival, where Adam casts a spell to revive all fallen teammates within a span of 10 seconds, but they will have a third of their health back, so the team will have to be careful in not making reckless decisions that could waste the opportunity the revive has given you. The teammates will also have a brief period of invincibility after being revived as well. Like Rocket's BRB, it'll be up to the player to have the correct judgment in deciding when the time is right to bring the team back. If done correctly, not only will you waste a potentially game-changing ultimate, but within the casting time, Adam can be easily shot down and killed. Of course, this ultimate is clearly influenced from Overwatch 1 Mercy's Mass Revive ultimate, where she could revive the entire team in a similar fashion. However, Mercy's version has a lot less depth. There are far less consequences in the Mass Revive, and was much easier to pull off successfully. There used to be so many clips of the entire team dying, and a Mercy flying in out of nowhere and reviving the team very easily. Look, I'm sorry to the Overwatch 1 players, you can say what you want about your game being peak, but that's boring and not fun to fight at all. Did I mention that everyone would also get all their health back as well, so they're free to go do whatever they want afterwards? Current Mercy doesn't have a Mass Revive, but instead a singular revive like Rocket's BRB, except it's a normal ability and not an ultimate. You can revive one teammate and they come back to full health, which is a fine downgrade, but lacks the risk-reward dynamic that Rocket's BRB or Adam Warlock's ultimate has. There's plenty of other examples I could go over within the Overwatch and Marvel Rivals cast, since a lot of the characters in Marvel are just more interesting versions of what Overwatch has to offer. Obviously, Marvel Rivals is in no way a perfectly balanced game, far from it actually, but the roles are a lot more defined in this game and actually do their intended purpose without being overshadowed by anyone else. DPS characters don't get out-damaged by the other roles, and tanks are still powerful while not being too weak or too strong. Supports still do enough damage to protect themselves and get extra kills here and there without doing it better than the DPS. Of course, you can argue that Marvel is a newer game that witnessed Blizzard's mistakes in Overwatch that they could learn from, but isn't that precisely what Overwatch 2 was for in the first place? No amount of changes to maps or collab skins or 6v6 can change the fact that the team doesn't actually listen to what the community is saying about the game and is giving us what they think we want. I can't be the only one who feels like they're testing out 6v6 modes just to shut us up. It's like my big brother passing me the unplugged Xbox controller just to make me stop crying or something. There have been good changes sprinkled in throughout the seasons, I won't deny that, but it's so hard to focus on the good hits when the batting average is so low.
Pitch to Pablo, there goes Belt. The pitch is inside, the throw down to second base goes into center field.
There's a reason why characters like Orisa, Widowmaker, Lucio, or Winston always inevitably fall in and out of the meta. The character design philosophies are inconsistent, and it's caused the game to be unbalanced for years now. The fired employees and the absolute gut punch of the cancelled PvE mode that was promised to us for years. The focus on skins instead of actual new content every season. Look at the season that just dropped. It's basically just a battle pass. And I hate to continue comparisons, but Marvel Rivals dropped 4 new characters within a week during a beta. A fucking beta. Meanwhile, we get a new Overwatch character like, what, every 3 months? Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure if the necessary changes will ever be made, but 6v6 certainly isn't the answer to the problems the game currently faces. Lots of players may have enjoyed the game more at the time than they are now, but it doesn't mean Overwatch 2 will be better for it. Don't get me wrong, I think it's perfectly reasonable to have a separate 6v6 mode if people really want it, but it simply won't replace 5v5, and that's the hard truth. Whether we like it or not, Overwatch is a completely different game now, and Blizzard are not about to undo that just because people are complaining too much. Now, I'll admit this isn't the most common request I see amongst players, but asking them to revert the game back to the way it was is just silly and unreasonable. We're not going back to Overwatch 1. People need to accept that. Before I move on to my final thoughts, I do want to bring up the benefits of 6v6 and how it might help the game in other ways though. The main thing people argue is that having a second tank adds another level of depth to the game, with more possibilities being opened up for combos and teamwork, which I fully agree with. It would also alleviate stress on the tank since they have a second tank to help them out whenever they need it, and it creates a lot less tension in the team overall since there's another person to help out. Also, having a tank duo or partner is just way more fun than being a solo tank, whereas the rest of the roles have a partner to help them out. 2 supports, and 2 DPSs. I'm fully for a 6v6 mode becoming the norm if the community has more fun with it. It'll be a nice change of pace for people who've been playing 5v5 for a while. The reaction to Overwatch Classic just shows that people enjoy 6v6 just as much as 5v5, even if it's old as broken Overwatch where nothing is balanced or makes sense. It's nice to see the community having fun for once after a long time of lots of people not enjoying the game as much as they used to. I will say personally, even though I enjoy 5v5, I won't deny the team comp feels a little more complete with a second tank, which may be another reason a lot of people were having more fun with Marvel Rivals and are still having more fun with it now, even after the new season dropped. The biggest issue with these latest patches are either doing changes that literally nobody asked for, or not doing what is actually good for the game unless it's an issue that takes priority, like a character being extremely broken in a new patch. The people they should listen to are the ones who have been dedicating lots of time and energy into the game for years. I understand they want to please everyone, but that's simply not going to be possible in a game like this. You're just going to have to pick your poison. Different levels of skill will offer different perspectives on what should be done for the game to get better, but different levels of skill also indicate levels of experience. Pandering to people who are not good at the game is one of the fastest ways to kill any online game. Of course, you can argue the difference between balancing a game for competitive and balancing a game for casual, which is kind of the difference between Marvel and Overwatch when you think about it. There's lots of work to be done before Overwatch can reach its missing potential, but regardless of that, it's still a fun game at the end of the day. Even if you don't enjoy the game right now, if the game wasn't fun at all for anybody, then no one would be playing it. It's really that simple. People can still enjoy a game they have problems with, and that probably represents a large percentage of the player base right now, including me. I don't play as much as I used to, but I enjoy the game much more now whenever I do because of that. I wanted to make this video because I feel like the community has been steering the conversation in the wrong direction, and it results in continued dissatisfaction after the results of that doesn't go the way we want it to. I'm not placing all the blame on the community, of course. Like I said, the team makes very questionable changes all the time, and those changes deserve to be called out. But there's still some responsibility on the player base too. Too much negativity is being spread out about Overwatch because it's not what it used to be, and making video essay number 5,000 about why the game has fallen off or why it's bad is sadly way more profitable now. That type of behavior is really unproductive and doesn't actually help in fixing anything. Instead of doing that above all else, this video is about how the game can be better. That's what we should be talking about. 6v6 won't fix Overwatch, but it'll probably make the game just a little more fun.